We live now in what I would refer to as a microwave society, a quick fix society.
What would you say an ideal pre-sleep routine can look like for someone with such a demanding schedule like that?
We can't make up a sleep debt.
The people who complain about it are the ones who are not actually helping themselves.
The more time we spend in it tossing and turning and struggling to get to sleep, we're building up a negative association with our bed and sleep.
In a study by the Law Gazette, 28% of lawyers said that their work required them to be available to clients 24/7, while 65% checked emails outside of work hours to stay on top of their tasks. The legal industry runs on high stakes and high accountability. Deadlines don't wait, mistakes aren't an option, so sleep, it's often the first thing to go. Today I'm sitting down with adult sleep expert Maryanne Taylor. She's been featured on Sky News, Channel 4 and Channel 5. Maryanne reveals how small shifts can transform the way lawyers sleep, boosting energy, focus and performance. She busts common myths and shares game-changing tips to help lawyers get better rest. So, Maryanne, what would you say are the biggest myths about sleep?
Ooh, that's a good question. There are quite a few, actually. So I'm going to jump in and start with, I would say, quite a popular one is you can't catch up on sleep at the weekend. Okay, so this is one that I always get asked is it okay if I sleep for an extra 2 hours over the weekend when I don't have to get up for work? Will that work towards my sleep need? And unfortunately, I'm going to call that myth number one. Uh, we can't make up a sleep debt. So we have an internal body clock. Our internal body clock is a circadian rhythm that operates over a 24-hour period. And unfortunately, that circadian rhythm doesn't read the difference between the 5 working days and the 2 weekend days. So that means that if we then get into a situation where we're adding on an extra few hours of sleep at the weekend, and then comes the Sunday night, Monday morning, where we have to start our working week again and set our alarm again potentially. We're playing around with our natural body clock, almost like we're sort of in a perpetual state of jet lag every weekend because we're playing around with that rhythm almost. So unfortunately, myth number one is you can't catch up on sleep at the weekend. Myth number two, I would say, would be if I can't sleep, I should just stay in bed and keep trying. So there is an assumption that when we struggle to get to fall asleep, whether that's at bedtime or in the middle of the night or early morning, that we should just lie in bed and keep trying. And actually, what this can be pretty detrimental actually when it comes to our sleep for a few reasons. One is it increases our stress levels. So we're lying in bed and we've all experienced it where we're lying in bed. Maybe you've checked the time, which also isn't great, but maybe you have and you've done that sort of mental calculation. If I fall asleep right now, then I'll have 7 hours of sleep. So we do that mental calculation, but we're increasing our stress levels. Our stress levels are rising because we're not getting to sleep. We're aware of the fact that we're not getting to sleep and we're becoming stressed about it. So that is obviously going to have a counter effect. But also, and this is a little less obvious, it's almost a little bit in our subconscious, is that we're building up a negative association with our bed and sleep. The more time we spend in it tossing and turning and struggling to get to sleep, then that association is built up. As I said, it's often subconscious. We're not actually that aware of it, but it is there. So that is another myth, I would say, is I have to stay in bed in order to be able to get back to sleep if I'm awake.
What would you suggest people do then if they can't get to sleep?
So I would say, so there's two different scenarios. You have scenario one where you wake up, or let's talk either at bedtime or in the middle of the night, and you are awake, but you're quite drowsy, you're feeling a bit sleepy, you're quite relaxed. In that situation, I would say do stay there because you are probably close to being able to fall asleep. You're feeling quite relaxed, which is pretty conducive to falling asleep. Scenario number two is the one that I'm referring to, where you are feeling really quite awake and you're quite far away from that relaxed state and quite far away from clearly getting to sleep. In that situation, I would say get up out of bed and move to a different space. I often call it a relaxation space. And this is a space that you will potentially have pre prepared. So it's not that you get up in the middle of the night and you're kind of frantically looking around thinking, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Actually have this pre-planned place where it's a comfortable space to sit, it's maybe dim lighting, something to do in that, something relaxing, whether that's a book or a podcast, audio, music, whatever it is that you find relaxing. And you go to this relaxation space until you start to feel sleepy. So you know that you recognize that feeling when maybe you're yawning or your eyes are getting heavier and you can feel that sort of relaxation happening, and at that point you get back into bed. So the reason for this, as I mentioned before, first of all, you are then actually centering your bed more around sleep rather than awake, and you are feeling more relaxed when you are in it. Even if you're not fully asleep, you're in that more of a relaxed state. So that's what I would really recommend, is to avoid just the lying, tossing and turning. In terms of how long to give it, I would say what feels like around 10 or 15 minutes or so. And that's when I say what feels like rather than clock watching, because that's another thing that is really, really counterproductive in terms of being able to feel more relaxed around sleep. It can induce a lot of anxiety. So I don't mean to clock watch and say, okay, it's 10 minutes, it's time for me to get up, but actually what feels like around that 10-15 minute mark and really no longer.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this one.
Absolutely. I've got to talk about caffeine because we can't chat
Ah.
about sleep without talking about caffeine. And I'd call my myth, I would say that caffeine only really affects sleep if we drink it, let's say, close to bedtime. And that is a myth as well. A lot of people know about the impact of caffeine and the impact that that can have on sleep. However, what I want to flag up here is how long caffeine actually stays in our system, and it's longer than we realize. It's got what we call a half-life of up to about 6 hours. So that means that any caffeine that you take in, and I'm not just talking about coffee. There's caffeine in tea, there's caffeine in green tea, which is quite surprising, in chocolate, fizzy drinks, and also in some over the counter medication as well that people don't often realize. So, this caffeine, going back to the half life of 6 hours, that means that any caffeine that you take in, half of it is potentially whirling around in your system up to 6 hours later, which is a really long time. And so people don't often realize that, and they think that, well, it's certainly if I'm, late afternoon when we all have that natural dip in our circadian rhythm, gives us that natural dip in focus, in energy, often around 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then people often find themselves reaching for some sort of caffeine to give themselves that boost to try and get through the rest of the day and energize a little bit, and they may be struggling then to get to sleep at bedtime or find themselves awake in the middle of the night. That might be a contributing factor. So I think that is an important myth as well. The caffeine only affects sleep if it's drunk too close to bedtime.
Mm.
Another myth that I refer to as the 8 hour myth. And the reason I say 8 hours is because I've taken an average. We see everywhere this sleep need, the average sleep need for an adult. And I think it's really, really, it can be quite detrimental and pretty anxiety inducing for a lot of people to assume that they need this exact number of hours of sleep at night. And if they haven't had that, then it's a fail as far as they're concerned. That means they haven't achieved good sleep. They haven't had a good night's sleep. And that then dictates to them, first of all, how they feel the next day. So if they feel that they haven't had the right number of hours sleep that night, then they feel that they're going to be tired, therefore they are. And also their mindset around their sleep, how they feel about their sleep. If they constantly feel that they're not getting this number of hours of sleep, then they are not a good sleeper. They deem themselves as not a good sleeper. And the fact of the matter is, we are split into long sleepers and short sleepers, like we are also those morning larks and night owls. So there are different factors to our sleep, and it's very, very individual. And it's important that we don't just assume it's a one size fits all situation, that we should all be having this number of hours of sleep. It's a bit like saying we should all wear size 6 shoes, or we should all be 5'5". It's a blanket sort of across the board statement. And for sleep, it's not at all the case. There's, as I said, it's very individual and very personalized. So for some people, they might find that they have about 6 to 7 hours of sleep at night and function fine and manage just fine and are productive and have enough energy. Whereas other people will say, no, I must have closer to 8, even 9 hours in order to be able to be at my best self almost. So it is very, very individualized. And I think it's really important to remember that we move away from this myth of eh, you must get this certain number of hours of sleep at night.
I'm really glad you said that, because I've been getting grief from people for pretty much my whole life because I have a lot of hours of sleep, like sometimes 9 to 10. But I feel like I need that amount of sleep. And if I have less, which I've really tried to do, go to bed a bit later and wake up at the same time, have like 7 or 8 hours, it literally kills me. It feels good for you to say, actually, it depends on the person.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to remember that, because it's easy to fall into that. We see it everywhere is, have you had your 8 hours of sleep? Or an adult needs an average of, 7 to 9 or whatever it is. But there are different situations for different people.
Is it about basically what you feel comfortable with or what you feel well rested with? Or can you actually have too much sleep and you don't realize it?
That's a good point. When we look at somebody's sleep in particular, I would, first of all, my first question would be, how do you manage your day? How do you cope with your day? Do you manage to do what you need to do? Do you manage to function? Do you manage to be productive and energized? Do you manage to do what you need and want? And the added bit for that is, for most of the day, on most days. And this is the important bit, because we're not robots. It's not a situation that we feel completely energized. Even the best sleepers in the world are not going to be feeling energized and at their best version of themselves every day. So that's where I add on the for most of the day on most days. Okay, so it's not
Mhm.
that situation. In terms of the second part of your question about can we sleep too much? Yes, that is a situation that can happen. I know for some people they would say, "What, that is not an experience that I've felt." So a lot of people that come to me are more about the fact that they're struggling to get to sleep, but there definitely is a situation that people are sleeping too much and maybe also feel that they're not refreshed. So they sleep for a long number of hours, but yet they wake up and they're not feeling refreshed and they don't necessarily feel that they've had good quality of sleep. So I think what is so important is that we look at not just the quantity of sleep, of what works for that individual person, but the quality of sleep and how they are feeling the next day. And that is very much tied into how they themselves are feeling. And I think it brings us on to also an important point here about tracking. Can I talk a little bit about sleep tracking?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's a very relevant point here. It's become hugely popular, so much so that it's even got its own fancy name. The obsession over sleep tracking is called orthosomnia. So it got its own special name, but has become very, very popular. This sort of this trend of tracking your sleep. So you get up in the morning and you look at the tracker to see how you slept that night. And I think is not ideal for some people. For some people, it's fine and it's great, and that works for them. But for a lot of other people who are maybe sensitive around their sleep or have some struggles with their sleep and some challenges, this tracking is not ideal. The reason being is that, first of all, the technology within these trackers is really not advanced enough to read very subtle differences often, and they are subtle differences in the stages of sleep between light sleep and an awake state. So, therefore, the picture that they're getting from this tracker is not necessarily a completely factual one, but it really it dictates to them how they perceive their sleep and how they feel the next day. So they're not necessarily able to make a natural call on it as to how they feel, how and also how they manage their day, because they're bringing that with them, that information that isn't necessarily completely factual, into their day with them. I worry quite a lot with some people about how the tracking really impacts on their sleep.
Yeah, and I think people wake up and they're like, oh, I wonder how many hours of sleep I've had. I wonder how many hours of deep sleep I've had. And then if the results aren't what they expect, then it kind of puts a downer on their entire day. It's like, oh, well, I can't function properly because I've not had enough sleep according to my tracker, you know?
That is exactly the point, and that's why I like to mention it, and I like to just flag it up, because again, people don't realize, and they might, just think, well, I need to track my sleep because I need it to tell me how I slept. But you move away. Sleep is innate. It's a natural process. We can all do it. Even the people don't who don't feel that they are that good at it, everyone, it's an innate process. It's part of our system. We are all programmed to be able to sleep, and the more pressure we put on it, the more we load onto it, the more that we move away from our natural process, our natural ability to be able to sleep. So for instance, if you have somebody who has been had struggles for quite a long time, who has had sleep problems over a few years, if you ask them what they do for their sleep, they will potentially give you a list. It'll be the paraphernalia, it'll be the sprays and the teas and the special pillow and all sorts, right? There's lots of different, so many things out there that promise you a good night's sleep. Whereas if you ask someone that doesn't necessarily have problems with their sleep, they might have ups and downs, as we all do with our sleep patterns at various points, but generally are generally good sleepers. If you ask them what they do to achieve good sleep, they won't really have an answer. They won't really have something specific. They just say, well, I don't know. I just go into bed and I sleep. And sometimes I don't sleep so well, but that's okay. So I think that that's the point, is that we've got to the point where we often put so much pressure on sleep that we just move away from that natural process of it.
That's very interesting that you say that, actually. You are right. I think we're kind of in a culture now where there is pressure on it, and they've not got the best sleep hygiene, and they know that they shouldn't be, drinking caffeine before they go to sleep, looking at screens before they go to sleep, intensely, or doing loads of different things, but they do it anyway. It's like, I don't really understand why the people who complain about it are the ones who are not actually helping themselves when it comes to good sleep hygiene, right?
I think partly it's because we live now in what I would refer to as a microwave society, a quick fix society. We want quick fixes, right? We want things done quickly. The pace of our lives is fast. We move quickly. Things move quickly, and we want instant solutions for things. And sleep is one of those things. And you can see whether it's vitamins or probiotics or over the counter sleep aids, whatever it is, we're looking for quick fixes. And when we don't get the quick fix, then it just, we say, all right, well, it's not fixable, I can't do it. We're not great in our current society at at sort of plodding through for the long haul. And it's not necessarily big things that have to happen. This is what I talk about a lot with my clients, is that often it's just small little habit changes, small little tweaks to habits. It doesn't have to be a complete, overhaul of your lifestyle, but it's the maintaining the small habits that get the bigger picture, that you move towards the bigger picture. And I think we're not brilliant at that, to say. I mean, it's like going to the gym and you're looking to get fit or to lose weight or whatever it is. And we just assume that if we go to the gym for, a few weeks on the trot, that should be that, and nothing's happening and you're not seeing the changes, then we just often tend to give up.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast are lawyers and entrepreneurs as well. And they're probably listening thinking, well, I have such a demanding schedule and I have so much work. I'm in a high pressure environment, high accountability environment. When it gets to bedtime, my mind is constantly thinking and going at a rapid speed. I'm working late at night. I'm working sometimes until 2 o'clock in the morning. They've got all these kind of things going on. What would you say an ideal pre sleep routine can look like for someone with such a demanding schedule like that?
It's good to address this, and it's hard. It's really difficult when you're in that kind of high pressure environment and your routines aren't set and you can't always stick to a lovely timed routine. So I would first of all say to be a bit realistic about what you can and can't do. The goal really, it isn't just to add more things to your day, so to start incorporating things into your day, but really just to try and ease yourself from an high intensity work situation and mindset into a more relaxed state. So in terms of what that looks like, so don't assume that you're going to go straight at 2 o'clock in the morning, having just finished the last email for the night. Well, I won't call it night, I'll say early morning. Close the laptop, go straight into bed, and assume you're going to be able to fall asleep, because very often you're bringing a lot of that with you into bed. So I would say being realistic, incorporating a little bit of a space. So even if it's half an hour, give yourself half an hour. I know it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but still, it will still be beneficial, because what you're trying to do is ease yourself into your sleep rather than jumping into it. The first thing I often recommend in situations like this is to almost mentally close the day, right? Draw a line under the day. Be sort of clear of, okay, the day has now ended, my work has now ended. And a very helpful strategy for this is to write it down. And I don't mean to labor the point and to spend 10, 15 minutes like agonizing over what you're going to put on there, but really just a brain dump almost. Unfinished tasks. Those are the things that you don't want to carry with you into bed. The to do list that will potentially come with you into bed, that will whirl around in your mind when you're lying there trying to get to sleep. Write it down. First of all, your brain processes things in a different way when you're actually writing it down and you're seeing it visually in front of you, not typing onto a computer and not typing onto a phone, but actually writing it down. So just brain dump onto there what you've still got to do the next day, the to do list. Also, what I find can be very helpful with some people is to have a quick mind scan over the day and pull out what went well, a few things that went well in your day, a few positives that you can take from the day, and also maybe the negatives. What caused you frustration in the day? What was irritating for you that day? And it doesn't have to be huge things. It might be that you didn't finish a piece of work that you wanted to, or you had words with somebody, or whatever it was. But just put it down there. Spend literally no more than 5 or 10 minutes on this. But it is a really helpful way of just drawing that line, mentally closing the day, to be able to also give yourself that cue that it is now bedtime. It's now time. It's now time to switch gear. Also, lights. The use of lights, very, very important. Making sure that you are having sort of the environment as you're switching gear is dimming the environment. So switching to, and actually, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. And when you're still working late into the night, try to use warm tones on your screen. So there's often blue light blocking settings on laptops, on phones. Try to use those when you're working late in the lead up to getting into bed as well. But also giving yourself that, once you're finished with work, is being in that kind of dim environment as well, to help the production of melatonin. Melatonin is our naturally occurring sleep hormone that gets produced in a darker environment. That's when we start to feel sleepy, when it gets dark and as we approach time for sleep. So you want to help that along by making sure that you're not facing too much of that bright light and you are in that dim environment, to help the production of melatonin as well. And I would also say to try and keep anything that you need to do in that later part of the night to more of a sort of low stimulation tasks. So rather than getting into, you know, writing arguments or high level or high stress pieces of work, try to keep that work that you're doing then at a low level. That's not always doable, I know, but it's just, I wanted to just mention it as well. Also, a physical wind down, a very short, doesn't have to take long, but helpful to have maybe a hot shower, a quick shower before you get into bed. First of all, it's a helpful tool in signaling to your body that it's time for to get ready for sleep, but also in terms of body temperature. So the hot shower, and then after you get out of the shower, your body temperature then drops. This also helps the production of melatonin to help you enable you to fall asleep more easily and to stay asleep more easily. So that physical wind down. A lot of people also find a bit of light stretching or some breathing techniques helpful as well if they're feeling particularly wound up and stressed out and buzzed almost from work and they find it hard to wind down. Just a little bit of gentle stretches and a simple breathing technique can be helpful to help with that as well.
They're really brilliant tips and things that I have not actually heard of before and wouldn't even think about, like the writing.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure I heard that writing before bed can stimulate your brain, so you shouldn't do it. But this might be a myth.
Ideally, I wouldn't necessarily say do it just before you get into bed, but I would try to move it a little bit further away. But if we're in a situation, as you mentioned, where somebody is working until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then obviously they're not going to necessarily get to that beforehand because they're knee deep in work, then I would do it then. It is just a helpful way to process those thoughts if that's a problem. If
Mm.
somebody gets into bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and crashes out and absolutely exhausted, then that's not necessary. But it's more for the person who is getting into bed wired, buzzed, and the thoughts are there. They're just whirling around and making it obviously very difficult to be able to relax enough to fall asleep.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I guess everyone's different, aren't they? I think a lot of people could just completely collapse and be like, I'm shattered, I need to sleep. And then other people need this type of routine. And I think these tips are brilliant for someone who is in a frantic situation where they're coming from work, at the early hours of the morning, or they're having a really frantic day.
And this is another thing that is worth mentioning is having that sort of clear separation, especially if there's hybrid working and you're working a lot from home. And this has become a bit of a problem actually, especially since COVID, where obviously the explosion of working from home and now hybrid working, that impacts a lot on sleep. It can do, in that it is hard to have those boundaries. This is work and this is the work day and this is your workspace, and actually then separating that into your home and your home space and your relaxation space and your sleep space. So this is something that is really important to flag up as well, that if you are in that situation that you're working at home and you're even working maybe in a desk in your bedroom, but it doesn't even have to be that much, but it is hard to separate that boundary between this is work and this is home.
Absolutely. That's such a good point, actually. Have you found that more people have come to you with these problems or worries? The fact that they're working from home and then it's hard to separate work and home life and actually really kind of decompress before they go to sleep?
Absolutely. This has become a big problem. This has
Mm.
really become a big problem, is that boundary. And also being able to, I talk a lot about permission and giving ourselves permission to, even though you're in the same workspace, and it is hard to sort of say, okay, well, this is it, this is my workday finished. When you're in that same space, it is hard, but it is being it first of all, the awareness is key, is being able to say to yourself, and hopefully the people who are listening to this will actually, this will bring some awareness to them where they will say, okay, yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? I need to have that separation. I need to have that boundary. So being mindful of that is the first step in making it happen. So I work with people one to one. I have a program, it's called the ABC program, that is over an 8-week period where we delve into not just sleep, but lots of different factors that might be impacting on your sleep. So, if you are somebody who has been struggling for a long time with sleep, you feel like you've tried lots of different things, as people often do who have struggled for some time. They feel like they've tried so many different things, but nothing's actually helped. Then come to me. But I also do a lot of corporate work. I give a lot of sessions in corporate organizations, law firms as well, on sleep and on different aspects relating to sleep. So I talk about menopause and sleep, habits, stress and anxiety, all those different factors that impact on sleep as well. And I also run sleep clinics within organizations as well, which is one-to-one support. So often I would do a session and that would follow with a sleep clinic for one-to-one more personalized guidance and help.
Amazing. I love the sound of all of that. It's so, as I say, it's so vital and so important for individuals and companies. What's the best way for people to contact you?
My website is thesleepworks.co.uk. That's all one word. Or I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up on LinkedIn, Maryanne Taylor. And there's all my contact details are there, so you can check that out.
If you've ever wondered how to build a legal career that fits your lifestyle and values, I've created something for you. 25 Ways to Do Law Differently and Get Paid for It is a free guide filled with simple yet impactful ideas for lawyers who want more freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment in their work. Just go to the description where you'll find the link.